over the past decade, my job has been more as a doctor of failing media organizations, is trying to go in and fix them and get them to the point where they can be viable again. So I've been living the digital transformation of traditional media into digital media for a while now. And some of that's been successful, some of it's not been so successful. Most recently, I was with a company called Newsright. And Newsright was an interesting construction in that we were created by 29 of the largest news organizations in the U.S., brands like the Associated Press, the New York Times, Axel Springer out of Germany. And our goal was to create a digital marketplace for news content and for data around news content. And the way that worked was that these organizations, which ultimately were about 1,500 publishers, mainly across the U.S., would feed us all their news content. We would put it in a large database, and then for all their websites, about 5,000 websites total, we would put instrumentation to let us understand who was reading what content. So we had this great database of content and of audience data, and then we sold that to other companies that were looking to purchase high-quality content. These may be organizations that do news aggregation applications on web or mobile. They may be folks who are looking to do media monitoring, maybe corporations who are looking to see how their brand is playing in the news. And the purpose behind this organization was really to create new revenue streams for existing media companies as a way to augment what has been a very challenging industry as of late. Out of that, I was thinking someone had to email the question prior to the session. I now am CEO of a company called Mezzobit. And what Mezzobit does is actually is work with website owners and mobile property owners to help manage the data that flows off their website. As Eric indicated, BuzzFeed is all about a lot of data. They understand who's reading what and what social uptake is happening. And so data is a big deal in journalism. It's a big deal on the internet. And my new company, which is going to be venture-backed, helps to manage that data, helps to do things around analytics and visualization. So I can talk more about that if people are interested, but it's a new venture and we're still forming it. Prior to Newsright, I actually worked with two organizations that were involved in the transformation of media. One of them, which is probably a bit more prominent, is a company called Newsweek, which was a global news magazine published at one point, 4 million copies around the planet. At the height, about a dozen years ago, had $350 million in revenue. And Newsweek is a poster child of the bad things that are happening to traditional media in the United States. I joined them about 4 years ago, and during that time, the Great Recession in the US had hit. The organization and most of the American newspaper and magazine industry was in a bit of decline. So we were losing about $40 million a year. Our circulation at that point had dropped down to about 2 million copies. And my job, along with a few other executives, was to go in and try and restructure the organization and get it back on the track towards not just profitability, but some sort of future viability. And ultimately, to make a long story significantly shorter, we did some of that, but the company ended up being sold. And it was sold for $1 US. Essentially, the liabilities of the company were so great, and even though there was potential there, that our owners just wanted to get rid of us. So they got rid of us, we restructured it, did some more fun things, and ultimately Newsweek stopped printing its print magazine last December. So here's an iconic news brand that had been around for 80 years, literally one of the top news brands in the United States, went from the top literally down to the bottom in a matter of about 5 years. And so that had nothing to do with the actual cratering of that, but it was difficult to see all that happen. And prior to that, I worked for another company which is not that well known, called Thomas Publishing. And Thomas was a business-to-business media company. They had sold information products to businesses to help industries or companies find industrial supplies. And they were a 100% print company back in the 90s. The internet comes along and totally blows away their business model. But unlike Newsweek, they actually were able to make the transition to the other side. So in the course of 10 years, they went from being mainly a print company to mainly being a digital company. But as part of that, the size of the company decreased by about 2/3. So essentially, they were 1/3 the size they were when they were completely a print company. My job there was to try and restructure the company and get it oriented to the digital business models. So I've worked a lot with companies trying to figure out how to make money on the internet, how to transition on the internet both successfully and unsuccessfully. And then my most recent venture is purely an internet venture because I while I love publishing, have started my life as a journalist 30 years ago, I think that ultimately the future really is more digital content and digital data. That's me.
Питання будуть у нас. Мене цікавить, як переходить print в digital. Сергій у нас сьогодні.
Can you share some ideas about the main problems of such transitions? Do you have any kind of recipe? Do step 1, step 2, step 3, never do these?
Well, I have lots of never do this sorts of instructions. Things they say that wise men learn from others' mistakes. So hopefully you can learn from the mistakes that we've made in the U.S. I think it is particularly difficult for organizations that have been successful with former business models to transition to new business models. I think the advantage that an organization like BuzzFeed has, even though it has a lot of people from traditional media in it, is it never had the old business model to move away from. So to start from nothing and to build to new, I think while it's very challenging, it's easier to start from a former success that has gone down and try and build back up.